and good evening, Sip&Talkers, no matter what part of the globe you're joining us from.
Welcome back. I'm Joe, and I am ready to unpack a story that is, well, it's way more explosive than a simple social media app ban have any right to be.
And I'm Sunny. And yeah, you're right. We've talked about Xiaohongshu or RED before. For most of us, it's just that app, where you find the perfect aesthetic shot of a Parisian cafe.
Or the latest viral makeup trend.
Exactly. But in Taiwan, this lifestyle platform just went from being a niche cultural guide to the central front in a battle for digital sovereignty. It's a huge deal.
I saw the initial reports, and honestly, the reaction across Taiwan just split right down the middle. And if you really dig into the data from their anti-fraud command center, this is not just about pretty pictures anymore. This platform has basically become a documented data mine and, get this, a business manual for organized fraud groups. The financial damage is just staggering.
Yeah.
And when the Taiwanese government announced this move, this restriction of access, you could almost hear the two sides forming instantly. On one side, we saw Group A, the aghast, right?
Yeah.
Mostly young users who relied on RED. They felt their digital freedom was being stomped on. They're asking, is the government really going to take away my source for travel and beauty guides? This is total government overreach.
And then on the complete other side, you have Group B, the cheering crowd. This is, the national security advocates, maybe older, more conservative folks, and people just genuinely worried about the cost of crime that can't be punished.
Oh, yeah. They were loud.
They were virtually shouting, "Good riddance, this was long overdue." For them, this is an act of cultural self-preservation.
And it's that exact sharp contradiction that makes this a crucial global case study. Taiwan is celebrated as this beacon of democracy and internet freedom in Asia, right?
Right.
And here they are taking this really hardline technical stance on a lifestyle app. So why does restricting access to an app about consumerism cause such a deep political split?
And more importantly, why are so many people willing to just sacrifice convenience for what they see as a necessary defense against, quote, red infiltration?
That's our mission today. We're going to move past the superficial stuff, the inconvenience, and dive into the real anxieties here. The fear of cultural absorption, the crisis of judicial sovereignty, and the sheer financial cost that fueled all that applause.
Okay, so let's unpack this, because the first thing we have to do is get really clear on what Taiwan actually did, because it wasn't a total permanent ban, was it?
No. And that clarification is absolutely vital. It really separates this from, say, the U.S. approach to TikTok. It was not a permanent ban passed by their legislature. The official action is super technical and specific.
Okay.
It's a stop resolution and restriction of access order. Essentially, they're using technology to stop the app from being able to find its IP address, its DNS, within Taiwan's network.
So if the nuclear option is passing a law that says this app is illegal, this is more like strategically flipping a circuit breaker. It's targeted. And what makes this really interesting is the legal basis they use.
Right.
When the U.S. talks about banning Chinese apps, they immediately go for these huge, sweeping national security acts. Taiwan, though, they took a very different, very specific road.
They did. And this is where the genius of the legal move lies, even if you find it controversial.
Yeah.
They intentionally avoided that heavy-handed approach. They didn't use the National Security Act, which would have instantly framed this as, a purely political move.
So what did they use?
They invoked the Fraud Crime Prevention Act, specifically an emergency event clause in Article 42.
That's like fighting a massive cross-border cyber battle using a local police badge, not a military uniform.
Exactly.
It grounds the whole thing in protecting individual citizens' wallets and social order, not some abstract geopolitical strategy. It makes it so much harder for the platform to cry political persecution.
It completely shifts the focus from intelligence gathering to consumer protection and crime prevention. And this framing is backed up by the duration. This isn't permanent.
Right, it's temporary.
The restriction is set for 1 year, starting December 4th, 2025. This whole thing signals that it's an emergency measure. It's designed to force cooperation, to compel the platform to change its behavior, not necessarily to slam the door forever.
It's a very serious, enforceable timeout.
It is.
But even for a temporary measure, the government must have had some overwhelmingly compelling evidence to justify disrupting the daily lives of 3 million users. What were the specific, non-political 3 strikes that triggered this?
The official reasoning was meticulously documented by their anti-fraud command center and the Ministry of Interior. So strike one, and probably the most tangible one, was just the sheer volume of massive financial fraud tied directly to the platform.
Let's get granular on those numbers because they're staggering.
In just the last 2 years, from 2024 up to now, Xiaohongshu was linked to a documented total of 1,706 fraud cases. And those 1,706 cases led to a cumulative financial loss for Taiwanese citizens of nearly 250 million TWD.
That's almost 42.4 million US dollars. Gone. That's not just a few bad actors. That suggests an environment that's like perfectly suited for sophisticated, large-scale criminal groups.
It is. And the scams were specifically tailored to the platform's demographic,
Yeah.
High consumption, young, often financially ambitious users. We're talking about very sophisticated operations.
Like what?
Fake influencers peddling non-existent investment opportunities, promising these high-paid, flexible jobs that just need a little training fee up front.
Of course.
And these really complex, high-pressure crypto investment schemes designed to fleece tens of thousands from a single person. This wasn't old-school phishing. This was bespoke scamming.
So the platform wasn't just hosting crime. It was providing the perfect aesthetic, high-trust environment for it to just flourish.
Which I think brings us to strike two. And this is, I'd argue, the core issue of sovereignty, the legal vacuum. Xiaohongshu, unlike basically every other major international digital platform in Taiwan, we're talking Meta, Google, even TikTok and Line, has refused to establish a legal representative or a company registration in Taiwan.
So they're making tons of money from the market.
Immense profits. But functionally, they don't exist under Taiwanese law.
And that's the critical difference. If you have a problem with Meta, the police can issue a subpoena. They can freeze assets if they need to. They have a legal entity, a person, a registered address to serve documents to. RD in its current state is what you'd call a ghost platform.
Precisely. And the lack of a local legal representative means Taiwan's judicial system is completely neutered. They have zero legal jurisdiction. They can't issue binding subpoenas, they can't demand data related to crimes, and they can't impose fines no matter how much damage is done to their citizens.
They're legally untouchable.
Completely. Operating with total impunity while turning a profit.
And that lack of jurisdiction led directly to the third strike, right? The active refusal to cooperate with law enforcement about these massive losses.
Yep. In October, the government sent a formal request, gave RAD a 20-day notice, specifically asking for data and cooperation on the fraud accounts linked to that $42.4 million in losses. They wanted to engage.
And the result?
Absolute radio silence for over 50 days. The official government statement characterized it as receiving read receipts, no reply.
That is an incredible detail. Read receipts, no reply. So dismissive.
It is. And this refusal stalled numerous police investigations. Victims were left with no recourse, and the fraudsters knew they could keep operating because the platform itself was basically shielding them from the law.
So when you line up those three strikes, massive financial damage, zero legal representation, and actively obstructing justice, the government's emergency action under the Fraud Prevention Act suddenly looks less like an ideological ban, and more like a desperate but maybe necessary response to a completely uncooperative foreign company that's exploiting its citizens.
And while that immediate trigger was financial crime, we have to pivot to the deeper anxiety for that cheering crowd, which is data security. This is where the National Security Bureau's technical tests come in and just escalate the whole issue far beyond fraud.
Okay, let's talk about the 1515 failure. That phrase alone should alarm anyone who uses a smartphone.
It absolutely should. The National Security Bureau ran these extensive security tests on the app, evaluating it against 15 established security indicators. Things related to user data privacy, secure data handling, network permissions.
And these are like the gold standard for digital hygiene.
They are. They check for excessive permissions, things like accessing your microphone when it doesn't need to, your camera roll, contact list. They test encryption. They monitor if it's transmitting sensitive info like real-time location data or your communication logs.
And the result, again, was a complete and total failure.
Correct. Xiaohongshu failed all 15 indicators. All of them. Which means it showed fundamental, measurable failures in every single check designed to protect user privacy. And the findings strongly suggest that the app's architecture is, fundamentally porous. It could potentially allow sensitive data photo albums, chat logs, location data to be collected and sent back to servers in mainland China.
This isn't a theoretical risk anymore. This is a measurable structural vulnerability. My take on this is if you hire a locksmith to install a state-of-the-art security system and an expert comes in and confirms it fails all 15 basic security checks and the locksmith refuses to answer your calls, you don't wait for the break-in, you dismantle the system and you lock the door.
And the problem is made so much worse by a geopolitical reality that we have to talk about. China's national intelligence law.
Right.
This law means that Chinese companies, no matter what their own privacy policies say, are legally compelled to cooperate with and provide data to Chinese intelligence agencies if they asked for it.
So the data risk isn't just bad architecture, it's mandated data transfer.
Exactly. The vulnerability isn't just about an accidental leak. It's about a foreign government having the power of law to demand your private data. And Taiwan has zero legal or technological recourse to stop it. Which brings us right back to this core issue of judicial and digital sovereignty.
So when a platform operates within your borders, makes huge profits from your citizens, but structurally remains outside your legal jurisdiction, that's a crisis of sovereignty. How does that challenge the rule of law?
It's the ultimate jurisdictional loophole. It just undermines the principle of equal protection. Citizens lose millions, and the government can't subpoena the data to prosecute the criminals or compensate the victims. The platform basically declares itself above the law while exploiting the market.
It creates this deep instability in society.
It does.
So the restriction, the temporary block, is essentially Taiwan trying to force an international regulatory standard. What's the non-negotiable message they're sending to every other foreign digital platform?
The signal is loud and clear. If you want access to the high-value Taiwanese market, you must comply with our laws. You have to cooperate with our law enforcement, and you must operate transparently by establishing a legal representative.
They're asserting their digital sovereignty where their physical sovereignty is, let's be honest, complicated.
They are. They're defining their legal territory in the digital sphere. They're forcing these ghost platforms to choose. Either become a visible, legally accountable entity or lose access to the market entirely.
It's a drastic solution, for sure. But considering the 7,706 fraud cases and the 1515 security failure, they seem to have calculated that the cost of doing nothing was way higher than the cost of this temporary restriction.
Now let's transition. Because while fraud and jurisdiction were the official legal triggers, the real motivation, the genuine motivation behind the enthusiasm of that cheering crowd, it ties into something far more abstract, something existential.
Cultural infiltration and cognitive warfare. This moves the whole discussion beyond money and data and into the realm of soft power, that slow, subtle influence. We need to clearly contrast the two biggest Chinese-backed social media threats, TikTok and RD. They function as entirely different types of weapons, don't they?
They do, and I think using a military analogy really helps clarify the different danger profiles for everyone listening.
Okay, so TikTok is what we'd call the shotgun threat. It has this massive mainstream reach, hundreds of millions of users globally. It's designed for rapid mass distribution of content. It's capable of manipulating elections, generating instant political narratives, and causing huge societal shockwaves very quickly.
That's the U.S. concern in a nutshell.
Right. It's the high-velocity, high-impact threat that targets a nation's political stability.
But RD, on the other hand, is the rifle threat. It has a much smaller, intensely focused user base in Taiwan, about 3 million users. And they're concentrated in that young, digitally native, high-consumption demographic.
So its objective isn't instant political chaos.
No. It's to achieve slow, deep cultural and linguistic absorption.
It's a long-term strategy, and the threat is so insidious because it's wrapped up in these desirable aesthetics. It's not political propaganda. It's about changing the fundamental way you view your own culture and identity through, well, pretty packaging.
Exactly. RD transmits ideology not through explicit political messages, but through aspirational consumerism, aesthetics, lifestyle guides. It makes consuming the cultural message, the values, and the language of mainland China feel chic and desirable and modern.
Let's break down that linguistic erosion. You mentioned seeding grass and Jimmy. How significant is that kind of subtle linguistic shift?
It's incredibly significant because language is the vessel of culture. When young users adopt mainland Chinese terms, they are subtly normalizing the cultural context that comes with them. Seeding grass for recommendations or Jimmy for friends. That's just the tip of the iceberg.
I see.
We see shifts in fashion terms, food descriptions, even relationship advice terms that are rooted in mainland Chinese consumption habits.
So you don't even realize you're speaking a different dialect of Chinese. You just think you're using the cool, cutting-edge slang. It's the soft power of language, changing the cultural conversation one product review at a time.
And this feeds directly into the deeper narrative the platform promotes, this Chinese dream aesthetic. The feeds show a very specific, aspirational vision of highly consumerist, hyper-aesthetic, exquisite living. And that lifestyle, implicitly or explicitly, is tied to the narrative of the PRC's modernization and national self-confidence.
It creates a cognitive shortcut. If all the beautiful, successful, aspirational content I consume comes from one specific cultural source, it subtly encourages me to accept that source's underlying national narrative.
It's the ultimate warm water frog scenario. The user never even realizes the temperature is rising. And that leads us to the mechanism of control, the algorithm and the documented internal censorship, which ensures this beautiful narrative is never interrupted by inconvenient truths.
How does a platform that's all about fashion and food manage to filter out politically inconvenient content without users even noticing?
It's achieved through what you could call selective blindness. The user is deliberately shielded from content that would provoke critical thought or highlight democratic values, and we have concrete, leaked evidence of this from 2022. It shows the sheer scale of the internal control.
Let's talk about the size of that censorship manual.
The leaks revealed 143 pages of internal censorship rules for moderators and algorithms. This isn't just a few guidelines. It's a comprehensive manual detailing exactly what cannot be said, shown, or discussed.
143 pages of thought control applied to product reviews and travel guides? That's wild.
And the most concerning part is the specificity around political sensitivities. The platform had implemented, and we have documentation of this, the addition of 564 new banned words in a relatively short period.
About what?
Related to highly sensitive topics, everything from Tiananmen Square and mentions of the Dalai Lama to seemingly innocuous terms like Winnie the Pooh.
So the algorithm is just meticulously curated to make sure the political environment is perfectly harmonious. You're only seeing a prosperous, aesthetically pleasing world. Dissenting voices, uncomfortable political truths, or even the subtle promotion of democratic values are just filtered out before they ever reach your feed.
It's that beautifully packaged dessert analogy we talk about. You think you're just enjoying the convenience and the aesthetic pleasure, but the hidden ingredients, the filtered information, the subtle linguistic shifts are slowly changing your cultural and political palette without you ever consciously registering the political hand behind it.
The platform's greatest danger is that it looks like a friend's recommendation, not government propaganda.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've established the government side, and it's compelling.
Yeah.
Massive fraud, zero jurisdiction, 1515 data failure, and these soft power threats. But we absolutely have to give equal weight to the very real and very strong opposition, mostly from Z generation users who value utility and digital freedom above almost anything else.
And their opposition is strong because it's rooted in two deeply held values: utility and freedom. For those 3 million users in Taiwan, R&D genuinely filled a critical niche. It had become their specialized Chinese Google for hyper-specific interests.
Right.
Whether it was finding the perfect tailor in Seoul, the best regional food guide, or the most effective beauty hack, the content was often seen as richer and more specialized than what they could find on local platforms.
So the ban, to them, feels like a massive information blackout, a huge loss of information diversity and utility, which is a core tenet of internet freedom.
And this brings us to the central irony, and arguably the biggest flaw in the government's execution: the VPN problem.
Yeah, this is the part that really gets me. Taiwan, which prides itself on being a democratic counterpoint to Beijing, a symbol of internet freedom, is now forcing its own citizens to climb the wall, to use VPNs.
A practice we associate with citizens in authoritarian regimes trying to access uncensored foreign content.
The irony is sharp enough to cut glass.
And the consequence is profoundly counterproductive. Instead of securing the user base, the restriction only teaches users how to bypass government restrictions. It might actually push them into using less secure, private VPNs that are way harder for authorities to monitor.
And it also worsens the digital divide, right? Because only the tech-savvy are able to flip their connection, which reinforces the sense that the government is either technologically inept or just plain hypocritical.
That hypocrisy charge gets amplified by the criticism of selective enforcement, the charge of double standards. Critics, including opposition legislators, are pointing out that if the goal is purely to fight fraud, the government is targeting the wrong platforms.
They have a point there.
They do. Meta platforms Facebook and Instagram and Line handle a much higher total volume of fraud reports and financial losses than Red, just because their user base is so massive. The government admits this. Meta platforms are in 5 of the top 8 spots for fraud case reports.
So why the technical block on a red, but just a fine or a request for better cooperation for Meta?
And that's the government's defense, which highlights the sovereignty crisis. Meta and Line maintain legal representatives in Taiwan. They cooperate with law enforcement, even if it's slow or cumbersome, and they are subject to local fines.
But already refused to establish any legal standing.
And refused to cooperate with any data requests despite all the fraud. So the government is basically saying, this technical restriction isn't about the volume of crime, it's about the absolute failure to adhere to the rule of law.
But to the users and the critics, it looks like anti-fraud is just a convenient, non-political shield they're using to target a Chinese-backed app specifically because they're uncomfortable with its cultural influence.
That political implication feeds directly into the psychological defense of the young users.
Yeah.
This psychology of denial or, I'm not that stupid.
This is a deep dive into digital hubris and optimism bias. Young users are digital natives. They're experts at dodging old scams. They laugh at the Nigerian prince emails. They can spot a fake Amazon login page a mile away. So they develop this inflated, often unwarranted sense of security. They believe they're immune to all scams, especially ones packaged in the hip, high aesthetic world of RAD.
But the reality check is necessary. The data clearly shows that the 18 to 29-year-old demographic is still a primary and vulnerable target. They aren't falling for low-tech phishing, but they are falling for new, tailored scams.
What kind?
Scams that exploit their specific modern anxieties, complex, high-pressure crypto investment schemes, high-paid remote job offers that target their financial stress, and sophisticated fake influencer schemes that leverage their trust in these online expert personas.
There was a perfect analogy for this. Young people are like ancient soldiers who are expertly skilled at dodging catapults, but they are completely blind to a modern drone flying overhead.
That's it. They've prepared for the threats of the last decade, but they lack the critical thinking skills to assess the regulatory compliance and complexity of today's high-tech financial instruments. Their intelligence is actually cursed by lack of perspective in these new high-risk areas.
So they might be able to code, but they don't know how to check if a virtual currency exchange is properly registered or regulated in Taiwan. The ban, while frustrating for them, is an attempt to protect a segment of the population that is often too digitally overconfident to protect itself.
Especially from threats on a platform that actively refuses any legal oversight.
Okay, let's elevate this deep dive. Let's position Taiwan's restriction as this crucial global case study in digital sovereignty for smaller democratic nations that are struggling against powerful, borderless platforms.
If we look at the 2 biggest actors currently regulating Chinese tech, the U.S. and Taiwan, their chosen defensive strategies against the same overall geopolitical threat, Beijing's digital influence, are radically different.
Let's start with the U.S. priority regarding TikTok. Their focus is fundamentally geopolitical, right? It's abstract. They're worried about protecting national intelligence, preventing algorithmic influence on mainstream society, and making sure a foreign adversary can't shake the foundation of their electoral process.
Right. It's an existential threat to governance. The U.S. is worried about an algorithmic missile strike on the White House. But now look at the Taiwan priority regarding RAD. Their focus is far more immediate, practical, and forensic.
They're trying to protect citizens' wallets, maintain judicial jurisdiction, and prevent social chaos from rampant, unpunishable fraud.
Exactly. Taiwan is worried about sophisticated robbers operating from a legal black hole in their neighborhood. And this contrast is sharply illustrated by a recent high-level action taken by President Trump in the U.S., which serves as a fascinating, highly symbolic counterpoint.
The Anti-Communism Week Proclamation.
Yes, President Trump officially signed the Anti-Communism Week 2025 proclamation on November 7th. The critical detail here is the nature of the action. It is purely ceremonial and declaratory.
It's not a law. It doesn't require any immediate change in technology or enforcement. It expands the scope of the Cold War era's Captive Nations Week, and its main goal is rhetorical, to remind the U.S. populace of the dangers of communism.
So the U.S. is signaling opposition through a hard declaration, a very high-level symbolic ideological statement aimed at values competition. It's a philosophical stance.
But Taiwan, facing an immediate, tangible threat to its civil society and financial integrity, used hard enforcement, a surgical, technical restriction backed by specific domestic law to force cooperation on a very immediate, tangible problem.
And this contrast tells us everything about their strategic priorities. The U.S. is focused on winning the ideological Cold War from a macro level. Taiwan, living on the immediate front line of both ideological and technical confrontation, is focused on the practical security and integrity of its local financial and legal systems.
So Taiwan's move is, therefore, an extreme but potentially effective solution for smaller countries struggling with these modern ghost platforms, these multinational companies that exploit market access without adhering to basic legal duties.
The world is truly watching Taiwan as the global lab for digital sovereignty enforcement. Will this temporary technical enforcement compel Xiaohongshu to finally set up a legal representative and comply with Taiwanese law? Will it validate the strategy?
Or will it just solidify the opposition, teaching more users how to go underground with VPNs, and ultimately strengthen the very mechanism of circumvention the government wanted to control?
It's a profound dilemma. As we saw, countries like India and Nepal have implemented total bans on Chinese apps, citing broad security concerns. But Taiwan's specific rationale and judicial non-cooperation tied to measurable financial fraud is highly unique and legally defensible.
They're arguing that compromising the integrity of their civil society and judicial system is a national security threat, regardless of explicit political propaganda. They're redefining national security not just in terms of military secrets, but in terms of the stability and trust of their financial and legal structures.
And that is a critical evolution in how democracies must defend themselves in the digital age.
Let's synthesize what we've learned. We started with this confusing spectacle of cheers and complaints over restricting a beauty app, and we've ended up discussing global geopolitics, soft power, and the evolution of national defense.
And the final synthesis is clear. The Cold War is not over. The battlefield has simply shifted. It's moved from conventional weapons to algorithms, financial exploitation, and smartphone screens. The U.S. is focused on grand, historical declarations, while Taiwan is preoccupied with the practical, tangible consequences of unbridled digital influence on its own soil.
And the most important takeaway for every listener, I think, is that the danger of a platform is often proportional to its utility and its invisibility. When an app becomes your Chinese Google for niche information, its structural censorship becomes your selective blindness, and its immense convenience becomes a shield for sophisticated, legally untouchable fraudsters.
Which calls for constant vigilance and critical thinking. And thank you to all our Sip&Talkers for joining us for this crucial deep dive.
Yeah.
If you enjoyed this analysis and want more synthesis of world news, be sure to subscribe to the Sip&Talk podcast wherever you listen. And for some lighter fare, including fun memes and the latest travel vlogs, check out our old friend Mickey's YouTube channel, Mickey to Life.
We'll catch you all next time. Stay critical and stay safe.